goal is to help you better understand accessibility and accommodation needs and requirements within your lab and your research group. Before we begin today, though, I would like to start with a land acknowledgement, and just want to take some time to recognize that we do have many people joining today's seminar, like we're virtual, so everybody, we have people joining from various geographical locations. So while I'm acknowledging the land that I am currently located in Windsor and Essex County, I'd ask that you all take a moment to recognize the traditional Indigenous lands and territories that you're currently on. The University of Windsor sits on the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of the First Nations, which includes the Ojibwa, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi. We respect the long-standing relationships with our First Nations peoples in this place, the 100-mile Windsor-Essex Peninsula and the Straits of Detroit, Miigwech. At the University of Windsor and in the Office of Research and Innovation Services, we recognize that successfully incorporating EDI into your research design and your research practices is a fundamental step in achieving continued research excellence. It is my hope that by attending today's workshop, you will gain insight into how incorporating strong EDI principles can strengthen your research innovation and improve your research outcomes while building and sustaining equitable and inclusive environments within your research lab and within your research team. I'd also like to take a moment to thank today's organizer, Kate Rosser-Davies from the Office of Research and Innovation, who has coordinated the planning today for our webinar, and to also thank our speakers that have joined us, Dr. Jay Dolmage from the University of Waterloo and Sherry Gagnon from the University of Windsor, the Office of Human Rights, Equity and Accessibility. We're looking forward to hearing our speakers' insights today so that we can all better understand how we can ensure we are creating accessible workspaces. I'd like now to introduce you to Kate Rosser-Davies to begin today's session. Over to you, Kate.
Okay, thank you so much, Heather. Before we get started, I will just give a little accessibility note about the webinar itself, and that is that if you'd like to turn on live captions in Teams, this is a recently implemented option that's available. So you can go to the upper right corner of your Teams window and click on the three little dots, the context menu, to get more actions. And then select turn on live captions from the drop down menu, and you should find that captions then appear at the bottom of the screen. And I encourage all of you to think about using or advising your students and your participants of this option whenever you're using Teams to present to a group. It's a great accessibility tool. So as Heather said, our panel today is going to be myself. I'm the Research Systems and Metrics Coordinator for the Office of Research and Innovation Services. And I have with me today Dr. Jay Dolmage from the University of Waterloo. He is the author of Academic Ableism, and I think you're going to find he's got some terrific insights about the role of ableism in post-secondary institutions and in research. And I'm also glad to have Sherry Gagnon from the Office of Human Rights, Equity and Accessibility. She's the accessibility manager for that office and an advocate for people with disabilities in the academic community. And I think we're going to have a great discussion with those two people. Okay, so my goal for today's session is to dispel some myths about disability and also help you to be ready to support HQP in your lab who need accommodation in order to do their best work. We're going to be going over some of the ways that disability may show up and what you should expect to happen when one of your personnel requests accommodation. So we'll be looking at ways that you can make your research methods more accessible, your research more accessible and results, and what you can do now today, like before the end of this week, to make your lab more accessible and more inclusive to researchers with disabilities. I have a couple of ground rules for my webinars, and they're really only 3 rules, so bear with me. The first is that, in my opinion, there are no stupid questions. We're here on this webinar today because we want to learn something new. And I promise I will not get offended by any questions that you want to ask, because I want you to feel comfortable learning. But I also think it's important that you don't fear feeling uncomfortable while you're learning. That's the feeling of being challenged. So learning is uncomfortable, but I really am going to do my best to make it worth your while. I do, however, have one other rule, and this one is a fairly strict one for me. It's about the R word. I think you probably know what word I mean here. I'm not going to say it. It makes me sick in my mouth a little bit. I know that this is a word that has some specific scientific application, and that's not what I'm here to talk about. Rather, if this word is still in your vocabulary as it applies to other people, I am going to ask you to make a conscious effort in your daily speech to stop using it that way. Like so many words, it was originally intended as a medical term. It's been applied to people with disabilities as a slur. I've had this word applied to me personally before, and I'm really going to ask that you consign it to the dustbin of history, because it is like getting a verbal slap in the face, especially if I hear the word spoken by somebody that I previously respected, whether it's to me or about someone else. So my hard and fast rule is please leave the R word out of any discussion that you're having about people with a disability. So you might be asking, what qualifies me to talk to you guys about disability? I'm not a researcher. I'm lots of other things though. So there's a good reason for me being at the forefront of this seminar though. I am lots of things. Like I said, I'm a UWindsor employee. I'm a pet owner here I have a dog and a cat. I'm a knitter. I'm a fan of history. I like a good costume. And I'm also an ice cream aficionado. And lastly, I'm a person with a disability. So I wanted to tell you these things that I am, because I've often had the experience of being pigeonholed when I tell people that I have a disability, because a lot of people think that they're already going to know what I can and cannot do. So to give you a little bit of information about myself, I was diagnosed with a neurological disability called dopa-responsive dystonia when I was 17. But because my disability is really, really rare, there are only a small handful of people in Ontario that have the same presentation as I do. I spent a lot of my young life going from doctor to doctor and having a lot of unpleasant and painful medical tests, and also being very, very, very visible in my disability. I'm one of the lucky people with dystonia because the kind that I have is treatable. I am going to be dependent on medication for the rest of my life, but I'm fairly high functioning for a person with dystonia, and I can work normally now most of the time. So from time to time during today's webinar, I'm going to speak from my personal lived experience. But what I really want to emphasize as well is that my experience is not universal. What I'm hoping to achieve through sharing my experience with you is the idea that disability shouldn't be the single defining feature of a person's life. And that's why we no longer really say disabled person, we say a person with a disability, because I'm a person with a disability along with a lot of other things. Okay, so do you think you know what disability looks like? So I ask people this question, they're all like, oh yeah, sure, people in wheelchairs. So think again, people with visible, obvious disabilities like wheelchair users are only a fraction of those facing accessibility barriers in work and school environments. You may not be able to see disabilities like chronic health conditions, mental health concerns, hearing loss, but they can really impact the way in which your personnel need to work. Some disabilities may be intermittent or remitting, meaning that your personnel are only affected by them from time to time. They may have long periods of remission. I've also included trauma in this list because while we have not always traditionally categorized it in the same way as something like multiple sclerosis or low vision, PTSD and complex PTSD can absolutely have disabling effects on a person and may manifest in ways that can be difficult to anticipate. But oftentimes those impacts can be mitigated through environmental adjustments. So the upshot of all of that is that you may already know a person with a disability and not even realize it. Disability is a lot more common than you think. According to the World Health Organization, 15% of the world's population, an estimated 1.1 billion people, identify as having some form of disability. It's also the only minority group that any one of us could enter at any time. A head injury, a car accident, a sudden loss of health, even aging. These could make you a person with a disability, and you may find yourself feeling grateful that you took the time to make your research space more accessible. So many disabilities are non-visible that, like I said, you almost certainly already know someone who's been dealing with disability in their lives. So we'd like to present you with two kind of case studies. These are stories that I'm sharing besides my own. These come from friends of mine, and I'm sharing them with permission because I want to give you an idea of what invisible disability looks like. These two stories are also contrasting studies in how access to accommodation can set HQP on different future and career paths. So in my first story, this is about a researcher who experienced a period of mental health conditions, including depression and anxiety. This researcher found that being in field work made them feel isolated, leading to an increase in mental health symptoms. They didn't feel comfortable talking to their supervisor about it, though. Their supervisor may have had a less than inclusive environment, and there may have just been a barrier in place to talking openly about this problem. So because they didn't feel comfortable approaching their supervisor, their symptoms worsened and contributed to the researcher actually pulling away from a career in active research. So here in this example, the absence of an inclusive atmosphere actually altered their career path. Now, where they are right now is a career at which they're excelling, which is terrific, but nevertheless resulted in a period of really unnecessary suffering and challenges that could have been lessened by a more inclusive supervisor and lab. My second example is actually a colleague that I worked with personally on a large knowledge mobilization project that I was involved in at the Ontario Science Centre when I was completing my master's degree. Not long before our project started, she was diagnosed with ADHD. Some of you may know that that's a disorder that presents differently in women than men in a lot of cases, leading to later and more difficult diagnoses. And if you'd like to hear more on the topic of gender bias in medical research, I encourage you to watch some of our past recorded sessions. In her case, though, our supervisor was extremely supportive, allowing flexible working schedules in order to accommodate the way that she had to medicate and rest and eat in order to manage her ADHD. She was also able to access supports through our university, through their Office of Student Accommodation, that included things like a digital planner, but also extra training opportunities. And that's really important. I talked with her about this recently as I was planning this webinar, and she said to me that the learning she did through the student accommodation office was easily as important as the tech and tools that she received. And I'm going to quote her directly here. What she said to me was, "You can have all the tools in the world, but if you don't know how to use them, you're still screwed." This experience was about a decade ago. So when I say our supervisor was extremely supportive, he absolutely was, but he kind of didn't really know what to do with this problem. And so my colleague had to very much be her own advocate, which is challenging when you've already kind of lived a life where you've had to be your own advocate all the time. She was lucky because her mother worked at Cambrian College in their Office of Student Accommodation. So she had more knowledge than most people about how to navigate the waters in that system. So my biggest hope for today is that you'll come away from this webinar knowing a bit more about how you can support your students and research personnel so that you can retain them in the field if that's what they want from their careers, and help them succeed without putting a burden on them, because believe me when I say they are already carrying a lot of weight. So where are we now? I'm going to ask Dr. Jay Dolmage from the University of Waterloo to take over the next section of the presentation and give us some contextual information about what's going on in the academic world right now, and also how COVID has impacted this this area of research. Jay?
Thank you very much. So, and thanks for having me, and thanks for that presentation. So, I do want to just talk a little bit about where we are, because I think that's part of the modality that we're in right now with COVID. Is we need to get a sense of where we've been. We need to get a sense of the state of things. as we're making decisions that are maybe once in a generation type of decisions about restarting research, continuing research in new ways, because things are changing in higher education and in our research environment in ways that maybe we've never had an opportunity to change them before. So my part of the presentation today is going to be about giving some of that overview, beginning with a kind of brief history of where we're at with accessibility in research in higher education in Canada. So a recent study, 2018 study, revealed that academics in Canada, disabled academics, receive really little institutional support in obtaining disability accommodations. Back in 2013, there was a story that showed that only 42% of Canadian universities even had a written disability accommodation policy for faculty, despite the fact that we have such policies for students, and they're very well known and very strongly implemented across campus. And a recent policy analysis reveals that little, if anything, has changed in the 7 years since. The policies that do exist largely don't centrally fund accommodations. And this is a big deal because it means that accommodations come out of individual department and unit budgets. And this also means that faculty are compelled to disclose disability at times to their chairs and deans, people who have a lot of power over them. And so this is one of the important dynamics about disability disclosure, is that we should not have to disclose stigmatizing disabilities to receive the accommodations that we need. And universities, as huge employers, often sometimes one of the largest employers in a community, it's unacceptable that they don't have policies that equitably handle the accommodations for disabled staff and faculty. The result then becomes a culture of silence and passing, and disabled people try to accommodate themselves. And I think the result then becomes that we're losing disabled researchers quite a lot. As bad as things are for faculty members, tenure track faculty members, we know that things are worse for non-tenure track researchers who have less security. As bad as things are for those folks, things are much worse for graduate student researchers, for whom these. So I'll give an example. At the University of Waterloo, I've been involved over the last 4 years in actually developing one of these accommodation policies for faculty and staff. And at the very beginning, administration said, no, this could not be a policy for grad students. So they've been left out of that whole process, and this is very common. The other thing that's important to say is that ableism is rarely alone. Racism relies on ableism, sexism relies on ableism, and when ableism intersects with other forms of oppression, the negative impact is accelerated. When we're thinking about building accessible research cultures, then accommodations for faculty and research personnel are imperative. And having a policy that secures those accommodations, that protects faculty, that centrally funds those accommodations, there are many universities that do this, right? If there are, 42% of schools do it, we need to look to them as exemplars, and we need to make sure that the other 60% have policies that protect disabled faculty. And those accommodations need to adjust to psychological, virological, and other emerging disabling factors. As we head back to campus at fall of 2021, the universities that don't have disability accommodation policies for faculty are going to be there's going to create a very difficult situation, as we're going to definitely have a lot more faculty who need accommodations now than we did before COVID. The other thing to say is that accessibility is not hard or expensive, but if we don't require it, nobody will do it. And that's the case right now, right? Other buzzwords around knowledge translation and knowledge mobilization, we simply can't do those things if we don't make our research cultures accessible and our research results accessible. And as I said, it's not difficult to do that, but we need to do it. So as I said, accessibility is not hard or expensive, but if you don't require it, nobody will do it. And the tough thing is that most research dissemination is not accessible, and that includes a lot of what we might call open access research, right? So a couple of relatively old studies now, 2007 study showed that only 45% of pages even use text equivalents to describe visual elements and images, and only 50% followed HTML standards. Only 24% passed basic navigational criteria. A study from just this year found that of the world's top 1 million homepages, tons of them are inaccessible. A lot of them are inaccessible, right? 51.4 accessibility errors per page. I'll give you another example here. I was involved this year, the Congress for Social Sciences and Humanities, the Federation for Social Sciences and Humanities runs a huge event called Congress, which I'm sure a lot of people know about. I was part of the Igniting Change group that wrote a lengthy report about what needed to be done to make Congress a more accessible space. And then when Congress happened, the Federation had paid a company to run their website and their program and all of their digital aspects, and that company didn't even provide text equivalents. So that entire infrastructure that they paid a lot of money for was actually inaccessible. And it's this kind of thing that keeps happening over and over again, even when simple accessibility, simple tools for accessibility are readily available and easy to use. And I believe COVID-19 has made the situation worse, as the rush to move more curriculum and services online hasn't been matched with the zeal for accessibility. As I said earlier, there's no knowledge mobilization without accessibility. And despite this, the orientation for research has been to create accessibility only when asked to. So I'll give an example. Cornell University determined that a university website doesn't need to be made accessible unless it's read by a certain number of people. When the US Department of Education determined that thousands of hours of video teaching materials hosted by UC Berkeley were not accessible, instead of making them accessible, Berkeley simply yanked them down. Most academic journals, especially ones run by proprietary companies like Taylor and Francis and Routledge, are not accessible, and people need to ask for special permission to get to the accessible features. Despite these bad examples, we know that accessible research finds a much broader audience, right? And it includes more than just disabled people. Making your research accessible for disabled people makes it more accessible for everyone. For example, it makes it more searchable, which is basic, right? I also believe that COVID-19 may be making it even harder to be a researcher with a disability. Faculty and student researchers are maybe facing additional barriers due to the pandemic itself and the ways that universities are planning to return to campus. The other thing, the bits and pieces of that back to work plan and what this means for disabled researchers is that return to research plans could fail to help disabled faculty and won't protect their rights. And I see this at my own university. We also know that the impact of COVID-19 has disproportionately disadvantaged disabled people. We don't even have really good data on disability among faculty in Canada, so we may not know what that impact is, but my prediction is that we're losing a lot of researchers, especially early in the pipeline. I talked about graduate students, for example. A couple of recent studies show that that's the case, right? Collecting evidence on the impact of COVID-19 on people with disabilities is critical, right? And we need to capture a sense of what accommodations have been offered to faculty and researchers. But a lot of the adjustments that were created due to COVID-19 may have also created a more disabling environment. 93.4% of neuroscience researchers, as just one example, have reported a loss of productivity due to COVID-19. And in that same study, and I think it's important to link to this, 58% attributed this loss of productivity to mental well-being issues. Around 3/4 of graduate students have reported that COVID-19 has negatively impacted their ability to conduct research, and they increasingly reported experiencing anxiety, depression, helplessness, etc. 72% indicated that these feelings increased as a result of COVID-19, and 26% of these graduate student respondents are now considering taking a long-term leave of absence. So we're losing researchers, right? According to ACUFA, 62% of students and 76% of faculty feel that online learning has negatively impacted the quality of university education. Among faculty, areas of highest concern were the ability to teach and support students, but also the ability to sustain their desired level of research and professional development, to maintain their personal mental health, right? Among faculty, a full 4 and 5 agree that the university's pandemic responses had a, quote, negative impact on my teaching ability or ability to convey learning material to students. And we know that this has an impact on service and research as well. While remote teaching and service may be more accessible in some ways, it's clearly less accessible in other ways. And we need to ask how that works for research as well. In terms of the intersectional impacts of COVID, evidence is already clear that the pandemic has disproportionately impacted women, and that this impact is stronger for women with dependents. Disabled researchers facing an additional intersectional barrier, such as gender, family status, or racialization, face new and serious additional roadblocks to success. Disabled researchers are extremely unlikely to have been accommodated before COVID-19, as I said, based on that lack of protection, right? And extremely unlikely to be accommodated during the pandemic response. So what can be done for the future? My belief is that supporting researchers as they recover from the impacts of COVID must be done in a way that takes into account these intersectional barriers that we talked about. Protecting and strengthening research will require thoughtful and concerted efforts on the part of governments, funders, universities, and academic communities to collaboratively develop and fund long-term plans that elevate those who've been hit hardest. To know this, we have to get better data, and we need to know how barriers have changed for disabled faculty. In a survey at the University of British Columbia, tenure-track faculty said that they, quote, would require more of the following resources than usual to get their research back on track. They needed more trainee and team support, more knowledge exchange, more partnership development, interdisciplinary collaboration, library access, international students, facility and office access, time, and childcare reports. And what will disabled researchers need to stay in academia if we're losing so many, or to return to their desired levels of productivity? How can we ensure that at the very least, researchers can get disability accommodations? As I said earlier, ableism is rarely alone. When it intersects with other forms of oppression, the negative impact is accelerated. COVID-19 will change how we think about disability, inclusion, accommodation, mental health, and a range of connected issues. I really believe this is true. I think if we focused on just, for example, mental health, we understand the barriers faced by some people to even get to the lab, right? Get to the point where they can perform research. And with the imposition of new barriers, we're losing many of those people. The other thing that I think it's really important to say is that I think COVID has revealed to us that it's not just that we need to have a strong research environment and one in which people with disabilities can be included, but that we actually need the insights of disabled people, many of whom were asking for the kinds of accommodations that we now all received to be able to, for example, work from home during COVID, right? But we need the insight of disabled people to help us handle big, huge problems like a pandemic. And if we're losing these people from the research ecosystem, from the research environment, then we're not going to get the best information. We're not going to have the best research. We're not going to have the best insight. And we're going to fail when we're faced with big problems like this. Okay, so that's my part of the talk. I'm hoping that there are ways that I can be involved through the rest of the presentation in talking about some of the solutions that we can come up with.
Okay, thank you so much for those excellent insights, Jay. So for the next phase of the presentation, I'd like to talk a little bit about, what you can do about these things that Jay has mentioned and about making your space more accessible. So I have kind of 4 pieces of advice that I'm going to give you about how to make your lab more inclusive. So very much my top line advice for you as a supervisor is never tell your personnel what you think they need. I've had this experience a number of times in my life of people knowing or people assuming that they know what I'm going to need. Not only were they usually wrong, but the onus ended up on me to correct them. And when you're a young person, a student, a grad student with a disability, that's a really uncomfortable position to be in and a very awkward conversation to have with your supervisor or your instructor. So I encourage you to have an open door policy for people so that they can let you know what they need in order to establish an environment where accommodation can be requested without it being painful for the requester. So make time to talk to your personnel and understand what they're telling you. I do want you to think about being aware of sudden changes at work. An abrupt drop in output or quality of work does not mean that your research personnel have suddenly decided to start phoning it in. I'd like you to think about opening the door to a conversation with your HQP to find out what's going on. You may find out that they have a health issue or that that person could have recently suffered a bereavement or some other life disruption. Work with them before you jump to conclusions. And I'm giving you this not just as an ethical guideline, guys, but and it absolutely is part of an ethical workplace to show compassion to your employees. But organizations here also have what's called a duty to inquire, and Sherry's going to talk a little bit more about the Ontario Human Rights Code of Human Rights, so I won't go too deeply into detail, but essentially what this means is if you believe your personnel might be going through something that's impairing their ability to work, you're responsible for checking in with them and making sure that you see if you can figure something out before you move on to disciplinary measures. If you're interested in learning more about this, take a look at section 3.6 of the Ontario Human Rights Commission's policy on preventing discrimination based on mental health, disabilities, and addiction. Don't look for one weird trick. There's not one size of approach that is going to make everything more accessible, although universal design is trying to make that a thing, and I'll discuss that a little bit more later. A lot of accessibility in your lab, honestly, is just going to come down to your accessibility as a supervisor and as a colleague. In a welcoming space, your HQP, your grad students, your colleagues will feel empowered. They'll be able to bring their concerns forward, and you'll be more confident. And by that, I mean you'll be more confident in knowing what to do with those conversations and in instilling confidence in them that you'll maintain their confidentiality and help them figure out a better way to work. Now, having said that, I just said that there's no one thing that's a panacea for accessibility, but asking your personnel what they need to do their best work is powerful. Not only does it give them a platform to bring forward concerns, but if you make this a part of your onboarding for everybody, then it establishes your lab as a place where addressing concerns is part of pursuing excellence. To cement your reputation as a supervisor who's inclusive, please make sure that you follow up with requests using supportive actions. Don't be all talk. So when you're onboarding a new graduate student, the magic words are, what do you need to do your best work? You may be surprised at some of the answers that you get. So having said all of that, I'd like to now invite Sherry Gagnon, the Accessibility Manager from UWindsor's Office of Human Rights, Equity and Accessibility, to take us through what the accommodation process actually looks like. Sherry?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you very much. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Jay. And some of the things I'm going to be talking about is reinforcing the messages that we've already heard. Coming from the Office of OREA, we'll be talking accommodation more from the perspective of the Ontario Human Rights Code. And under the Ontario Human Rights Code, we have a duty to accommodate. And the reason why the code has this duty to accommodate is to ensure that all persons have equal opportunities, equal access, and to things in our communities, in our societies, and can enjoy equal benefits. The Commission encourages clear and effective policy and procedures in order to make it a comfortable environment for people to seek accommodations. So we've already worked with HR. We're going to be working with other hiring units, but there are 5 points under the AODA when we are recruiting people to work at the university all the way to onboarding, where we are required by law to tell people that they can ask for accommodations. So having it at these 5 points from recruitment to onboarding helps normalize the conversation by having it frequently and having it often. And then when employees are onboarded, they are also to be aware of where to find our accessibility policy. So we're going to make sure that all of our units are doing that. It is an AODA reporting year, so we're going to make sure that we're following all of the aspects of the law. So organizations are required to prevent and remove barriers and required accommodations to the point of undue hardship. So the onus really does fall on to the employer, and it's not just enough to say, okay, if you identify a barrier, we'll remove it or we'll do things to work around it. We also have to be thinking of barrier prevention. So some of the things that Kate was already talking about are some of the things that we can be proactive about in making sure that we don't have barriers in the first place. Failure to fully explore accommodation options and to fulfill the duty to accommodate is a violation of the Human Rights Code. So, of course, we want to do these things because it's the right thing to do, but it is a law that we are required to follow. So under the Ontario Human Rights Code, the Commission identifies several areas where accommodation issues in employment most often relate to. And you'll see in brackets that's a code protected ground. So a lot of issues to accommodations often involve employees with disabilities, older workers, employees with religious needs, people who are pregnant, and employees with caregiving responsibilities. And so that would be protected under family status. And I just want to address family status briefly. Our Human Resources Department has quite a bit of information, and I have the links in this presentation about return to campus and some of the accommodation needs that may be coming up, and some of it will be related to these 5 points that I've just mentioned, but also family status. We often talk about it in terms of caregivers with young children, and we also talk about it as people being the caregiver for an aging parent or an aging relative. But it's a lot broader than that. So there's a lot of families like mine, for example, that have adult sons and daughters who have disabilities and require caregiving support, or your partner or spouse may need caregiving support, so that would also fall under family status. So the principles of accommodation. So if somebody comes forward and needs an accommodation, all the way from the beginning of this conversation, all the way to implementing an accommodation plan, all of those conversations and the processes and policies need to follow these principles of accommodation according to the Ontario Human Rights Code. So the first one principle is dignity. So we really need to protect people's dignity when they actually come forward and disclose that they do need an accommodation. We have to maintain their privacy, maintain confidentiality. I know, it might be hard at times when people are saying, why does this person get to do this? But we can't disclose any personal information. Think about the person's comfort and also respecting their autonomy. So kind of like what Kate was talking about is don't assume what they need. Honor and listen to the person's voice. Also respect that they may be able to do the same thing as someone else, but they may get around it differently. So respecting their autonomy at getting to the end point in the way that works best for them. Accommodations need to be individualized, so there's not like a checklist that anyone can provide and you can just pick and choose from this list of accommodation. Every time an accommodation request comes forward, it needs to be treated afresh, anew, looking at the context of the situation for that person, and so each one must be individualized to that person's needs. So you may have two people that come forward, both with a very similar disability, but what that accommodation plan may look like could be very, very different. And then the goal of accommodation is inclusion. So in the disability community, we often talk about it's not good enough just to build a ramp and get people in the door, but it is what we need to do is make sure that people are being valued, they are being contributors, they're fully integrated, and they are participating. So the goal of inclusion is preventing and removing barriers means all persons should have access to their environment and face the same duties and requirements with dignity and without impediment. So the most appropriate accommodation must be identified and implemented short of undue hardship. So the threshold for undue hardship is actually very high. This is quite a high standard, and the evidence of undue hardship is upon the accommodation provider, so the employer. And there's only 3 factors that can be considered when claiming undue hardship. So some people might talk about more, but it really is only 3 that are identified under the Ontario Human Rights Code. So the first one being cost. The employer has to determine that it is the cost is too onerous, it would have a negative impact on the organization. The organization must demonstrate that they've looked for additional sources of funding, grants. There may be other organizations who are able to provide the equipment or services or supports for that employee. And if you've exhausted all your external outside sources of funding, then that would be considered undue hardship. And then finally, health and safety requirements. So if you can't provide an accommodation that keeps the employee safe as well as others safe, then that could meet the terms of undue hardship. But again, the threshold is quite high. So there are 2 accommodation processes at the University of Windsor for students and employees. And the first one, as many of you are aware of, is the academic accommodation process. So that is upon the students to contact student accessibility services. Of course, they work with the students to collect necessary documentation. They house it. They only disclose as much as needed to be disclosed, and they work with the student to determine support needs. And the student is given an accommodation letter to share with their instructor. And then again, like what Kate was saying, there is a duty to inquire. So if you feel that a student may need some supports, and you do notice a change in behavior and you're wondering, maybe something is going on, there is a duty to inquire. The students do not have to disclose, or the employees do not have to disclose their disability, but you could point them in the direction of where they could get supports. And then the accommodation process. So this does apply to our grad students who are employees. And so this is a different process. It's the employee accommodation. So this process is owned by HR, and employees are required to fill out an employee request for accommodation form. And there's a hyperlink to that on the HR website. The forms go to the supervisors contact HR, and then HR begins a formal accommodation process. So it is required to be a collaborative process under the law, that the employee has a responsibility to be involved, the supervisor and HR, and it may involve other parties. So the union may be involved. OREA often acts, well, not often, but can act as a resource anywhere along the accommodation planning process. Faith leaders and other experts or people may be contacted to get appropriate documentation to make sure the best accommodation plan is put into place. So once a plan is developed and agreed upon, it's documented, and then the plan is implemented and monitored ongoing. So it's not hard to be accommodating. So sometimes somebody may approach you, for example, and I have a hearing impairment, and so it's better if you're talking to me or you're giving instruction to the lab, could you face outward? Okay, there's a question here. Okay, if a student is, yes, if a student is hired in the capacity of an employee, then the employee accommodation process would take place. So if there will have time for Q&A. If that's not clear, we can talk about it a little bit more. And there may be something that I'm missing, so I'd be happy to have more discussion on that. So when somebody, so sometimes we can have, research assistant. Thank you, Kate. So when somebody comes to you and they may have just a simple, request, and you, as human to human, like if it is just, a mild hearing impairment and they need you to face them, I don't think that should be a very hard thing to do without going through a formal accommodation process. Or if you notice that somebody's having a hard time getting around the lab and it might be a matter of just moving a couple of things to make it a little easier, or if somebody's having a hard time standing at a workstation and it's not going to be threatening their health and safety to have a seat, that a seat would be given. Sometimes people are overwhelmed and by too much sensory input, and they can actually feel a little bit more calm. They can actually produce their work better if they have earphones in. So if that's not a health and safety issue, that's something that you could just do and just have a conversation. But where it requires a little extra planning, or there may be extra support that is required, then going through the formal accommodation process makes sense. So sometimes adaptive technologies and screen readers may be helpful, movement of large equipment, support for medical leave. There may be additional training that may be required, braille signs, ergonomic workstations, or specialized equipment. So sometimes we do have to go through that formalized process to make sure that the employee gets as much support as they need to do their job well. Here's a bunch of links that I've put here. So the University of Windsor actually has an accommodation and employment for persons with disabilities. These are some HR documents here for return to campus and mental health resources, and then there's a link to the Ontario Human Rights Code. Okay, at this point, I think we turn it back over to Kate.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. And I'm just going to let everybody know as well that those links will be available on ORIS's website via this presentation. We'll usually get recordings posted within a couple of days. So if you wanted to explore those links more deeply, you'll be able to do that online shortly. So I'd next like to talk a little bit about how to make your research model a little bit more accessible. So this is things like making sure that people with disabilities can engage with your researchers as end users. So this is a little bit less about employing grad students, HQP, postdoctoral fellows who have disabilities, and more about how you can make your actual research and the outputs thereof a little bit more accessible. So I want to talk about questions you can ask yourself at the beginning of your project, because it's harder to ask these questions at the end. First of all, how will people with various disabilities interact with your work? So think about if you're patenting a design for a vehicle part or, you know, some other type of technology. How will a person with a physical disability interact with it? What about a mental or intellectual disability? Would they be affected by a chronic disability in ways that they interact with your research design? Are people with disabilities represented in the sample of your human subjects? I know that those of you who deal with REB clearances and have gone through your TCPS2 are aware of some of the historical issues of not having truly representative samples, but even today there are not always inclusion of disabled people with disability as as part of human participants, and so that can really impact the way that end users who have a disability may experience your work there. Is your knowledge mobilization accessible? Now, Jay talked about this a little bit too, and it's really important. You may not be able to control the accessibility standards of the journals that you publish, and I get that. There's only so much power that we have there. But if you share your results on like a personal website, and you're using maybe WordPress or Wix or something like that to build out your website, or even you host it on the University of Windsor's own website, all of those have online onboard tools, native tools that you can use to make your content accessible. So I encourage you, they all have YouTube videos to get to know these features and learn how to use them easily. They're robust tools. They meet the highest standards as long as you as the content creator actually engage with the process of doing those. So is your research team inclusive? Are you listening to their ideas? Research personnel who have lived experience with disability are more likely to offer up ideas to incorporate accessibility into your research model. And so I do ask that you hear them and take action on their suggestions. And finally, are you doing minimum compliance, or are you trying to engage with the spirit of accessibility guidelines? And that's an issue that we run into a lot, is people are like, well, I'm doing the bare minimum. What more do I need to do? I encourage you to think about what more you can do, because as has been mentioned by both Sherry and Jay, it doesn't have to be expensive and it doesn't have to be difficult. You just have to think about it at the beginning, not the end. And to that end, one of the concepts that you might be interested in exploring after this presentation is universal design. And I'm really only going to touch on this very briefly. It's actually a fascinating area of work. It's defined as the design and composition of an environment so that it can be accessed, understood, and used to the greatest extent possible by all people, regardless of their age, size, ability, or disability. An environment or any building, product, or service in that environment should be designed to meet the needs of all people who want to use it. So I think applying this to research, the principle of universal design means that you set up your research from end to end so that it can benefit everybody and so that it can be used by everybody. So it doesn't mean you don't make a special requirement, you just fold it into your research design. It's a fundamental condition of how you design your research. If a study or a device or an environment or an activity is accessible, usable, convenient, and a pleasure to use, everybody benefits. By considering the diverse needs and abilities of all throughout the design process, universal design can help you create research outputs, products, services, knowledge, environments that meet people's needs. So there is also a business case for inclusivity in research. And I've included here a great quote from Frank Lloyd Wright, which is that you can use an eraser at the drafting table or a sledgehammer on the construction site. And what he's reminding us of there is it's easier to make changes at the beginning of a project than to come to the end and go, oh no, I didn't think of this thing that actually is really important. Meeting edge cases is going to encompass the so-called average user, and also average is not really a good measure for capturing the market for the outputs of your researchers for your research. Most of the averages that we think of off maybe the tops of our heads are actually based on fairly narrow subject groups. And a good example of this is the body mass index, which was originally developed with a subject group that only included fit men of average height. So it doesn't really necessarily extrapolate well to other groups. And tech scaffolding has broadly applicable uses. So if you develop a technology and you build accessibility features into it at the beginning, that is going to be broadly applicable to uses of your technology later on in the cycle of its life, and also may result in the development of features that could have huge impacts on other areas of technology. So as part of the idea of folding inclusivity and accessibility into your research model, you might want to think about how you recruit in a way that might reach people with disabilities. Having a person with a disability on your team will give you more insight, different insight into how people with disabilities are going to interact with your work. And so you might like to think differently about inclusive hiring practices when you're recruiting new HQP from among grad students or from, the wider academic community. If you're seeking out postdoctoral fellows, PhD students, etc., how can you make the hiring process more accessible? Now, part of this is a more institutional responsibility, but there are things that you can do. So inclusive hiring practices on your end might include things like if you make a Word document that has your job posting in it, make sure you use Word's accessibility tools just to make it suitable for screen readers, for example. Have alternative or formats of information available like large print job postings. Provide information about interviews when you invite candidates in. And this is things like how long of an interview they might expect, because, for example, some people have to take regular medication breaks and that allows them to plan accordingly. Where they might find accessible parking and facilities like washrooms, and make sure it's clear on job postings how candidates can request accommodations. So Sherry covered this a little bit and about how the university handles this, but if you're sharing postings outside of the university, make sure that that's something you bear in mind, that the university has language, and that language is important about how people can request accommodations during the recruitment process. And this practice can actually go hand in hand with learning that we've previously done if you've attended some of our other sessions about incorporating gender neutral language into your job postings and creating generally a more fulsome EDI practice in your recruitment processes. If you're interested in learning about hiring practices that are more inclusive and more accessible, I encourage you to visit the Ontario Disability Employment Network. They have an absolute wealth of learning opportunities that are mostly like free videos and articles online. So it's really a good way to get started on figuring out how you are going to execute more inclusive hiring. And this is something that Jay mentioned as well, and I'm going to harp on it a little bit because it is incredibly important. Disability does not exist in a vacuum. Lots of people who have experienced disability in their lives also face other barriers. This can be due to gender, racialization, class, sexual identity, and various other identities that we typically associate with barriers and with oppressive structures. So considering intersectionality just means to understand that a person who's coming to you requesting an accommodation because of a disability may also be shouldering other burdens. So this is your reminder to be compassionate with the HQP that you employ in your lab. A more equitable and inclusive lab space is one that acknowledges intersectionality and supports personnel as they navigate these challenging waters. So for the final section of the presentation here today, I want to talk about what you can do instantly to make your lab more accessible. So none of these things that I'm going to suggest to you really cost money. None of them are going to take you weeks and weeks to execute. There are things that I want you to think about doing right away. And there are also things that if you're developing a grant application that requires an EDI statement, they are concrete actions that you can take and that you can discuss in developing your EDI statement. So 5 quick actions. Number 1, we've talked in some previous learning, especially that we did with Dr. Lisa Willis last summer, about having a lab code of conduct. So I would like you to think about acknowledging the role of ability in your lab's code of conduct and including a statement in your lab code of conduct, if you have one, that that advises students that they can request accommodation for a disability and lets them know how you'll handle that, and how you'll handle that should be confidentially. Number 2, use accessibility tools in Word, Adobe, and online editing tools. This is one that it actually drives me crazy when I see people not doing it, because these tools make it so easy. You almost have to be trying not to these days in order to miss the mark here. But some web editors do bury their features a little bit. So take 15 minutes to find out where those features are in your web editor and watch a YouTube video about how to get the basics going. It will make a huge difference. And I'll tell you this as well. Most of the accessibility tools in web editors and in Word also improve the graphic design of your output. So use them because they're accessible, but also use them because they're just going to make your reports look better. So number 3 is make sure you and your personnel know how to request accommodation. You've had the opportunity to hear Sherry describe a little bit about what the accommodation process at the University of Windsor is like, both for students and for employees, and they are a little bit different. So make sure that, familiarize yourself, but also let your students know that those processes exist. Because if advocating for themselves is something they haven't had to do before, they may not know where to start. Number 4 is keep your lab tidy and easy to navigate. And this sounds fairly obvious, but we're often in a hurry moving around our working spaces. You drop a box on the floor and you say, oh, I'll come back to that later. But if you've left a hazard in a footpath, that can actually, that damages the accessibility of your lab. If you had a researcher who maybe has like a broken leg or something and is just hopping around on crutches, if there's an obstruction in a pathway, then they cannot access their workstation safely. And really the last thing, and I feel like I've said this a couple of times, but it is incredibly important, listen to your personnel, both their ideas and what they need to do their work successfully. So to build on this a little bit, an accessible space has good lighting. An accessible space has open footpaths. An accessible space is signposted and well labeled. And if you have researchers, HQP personnel in your lab who speak a number of different languages, you may find it helpful to include your signposting in a couple of languages. especially around safety information to make sure that there's no way for people to misinformation. I know that a lot of our signposting at the university includes Braille text. If that's something you want to add in your lab, then start with your facility manager to see how that can be done. And finally, an accessible space is one that's welcoming and has inclusive leadership, and that's where you come in. So let's talk about what an accessible supervisor looks like. An accessible supervisor recognizes personnel's diverse needs and makes sure, again, that they know how to request accommodation. An accessible supervisor asks personnel what they need to succeed during onboarding. And what's important here is you don't just ask people who you think might have a disability at the time of onboarding, you ask everybody, because that gives you the opportunity to let people with non-visible disabilities know that the process is available for them as well. An accessible supervisor is not all talk. There are a lot of places that will talk a good game about accessibility and accommodation, but when it comes time to take action, there might be delays, there might be budgetary issues. I encourage you as much as possible to back up your words with actions. Maintaining confidence could not be more important. Sometimes within the accommodation process, your HQP or your personnel are going to have to disclose medical information to you. If you disclose that information, you could be in danger of a HIPAA violation or any number of university policies and et cetera. And also just like, don't do it. If somebody tells you something in confidence, keep that to yourself. And finally, prevention of workplace bullying. Now, this is a complex topic that we could spend hours and hours just talking about workplace bullying. But if you are seeing that maybe a personnel who has a barrier is being prevented from accessing equipment by their peers or is in some way having their work sabotaged, you as a supervisor do have a responsibility to address that problem within your lab. Nobody wants to work in a toxic working environment. People with disabilities are not different in that respect, but they can be targets sometimes. And I have personally experienced this, so I'm speaking from a place of knowledge. And these are all actions that can be included in your EDI statement. So as you develop inclusive practices in your lab, like I said, you can fold these into the crafting of an EDI statement for a Tri-Council grant. So a couple things to wrap up with. Ramps are easy, culture is hard. Sherry mentioned this as well, and I think it's drawn out of Jay's material too. Compared to changing our culture, the way that we interact, slapping a ramp on a building is easy. But the work of accessibility can't stop there, because an inclusive culture will attract more and better HQP and ensure that they succeed. And changing culture does start with you. You're the leaders in this area, and by taking the lead to building inclusive and accessible lab spaces, you set the tone for those around you and for those that you supervise. We do get some questions from people that come up pretty frequently, and I'd like to talk about a couple of them. The first is, some people are uncomfortable with this conversation. Listen, I get it. It's an uncomfortable area to be in. I promise you that it's okay to be uncomfortable. I said that at the beginning, it's still true. But discomfort is sometimes something we have to live with in order to grow as people and to support the personnel that we're responsible for. Now, your discomfort will pass, but I guarantee you that whatever personnel who's coming to you to disclose an issue has probably lived with some degree of discomfort for possibly their entire life. So I really invite you to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. We also often hear the feedback that people are afraid they're disadvantaging their personnel by accommodating requests, and I'm very much strongly going to push back against this. You might be concerned that you're not teaching your personnel to be tough in the working world. I don't think that's correct. It doesn't disadvantage your HQP to understand what their rights are and learn that they deserve to be accommodated. Are they in your lab to learn, or are they just there to compete with one another? Universities have long historically been the training grounds that shape the workplaces and cultures of tomorrow. So when you teach your personnel that their requests for accommodation deserve respect and deserve to be implemented, you are helping them reshape the industries that they're going to go to into places that are more accessible to all people, not just people with disabilities, but those with other intersectional identities as well. Okay, so I promise we're nearing the end and you're probably tired of listening to me. That's okay. The last thing that I'm going to say is that diagnosis is a privilege. Some of us who have had long journeys with our disabilities before we ever get to a medical diagnosis. So I was personally diagnosed with dystonia at age 17. I had gone through a decade of extremely apparent mobility disorder. And when I say mobility disorder, I mean there was a time when I was a teenager that like I could barely walk. And all of that was because my disorder is really rare. I hadn't yet found the doctor who understood what it was. But I was lucky. I had the privilege of a middle-class upbringing and parents who could take time off work and drive me to London or Toronto to see a specialist. My parents are fluent in English and were confident navigating a medical system that can be arcane and challenging. Also, my disability was very obvious to people. Even if they couldn't diagnose it, there was nobody who questioned that I had it. So there are permanent impacts of my disability that are never going to go away. But I have access to a highly successful treatment that is affordable and does not require extensive or continual medical intervention. Again, I'm really one of the lucky ones. But a lot of people face serious barriers to diagnosis, and this can include things like a lack of access to primary care physicians, inability to travel to specialists. Like if you're a kid with a disability and your parent works, 12 or 14-hour days, it's hard to go see the doctor. People may have language and cultural barriers. So if somebody doesn't speak English, how much harder is it for them to access medical care so that they can get a diagnosis in place so that they can go through accommodation? There are also impacts of individual medical practitioners that carry within them systemic biases and ignorances, and these can absolutely include both sexism and racism. I was seeing a doctor at age 17, and on more than one occasion, people were like, well, are you sure you're not just a little bit stressed or maybe you're menstruating? And that's, gross, thank you, but no. So getting a diagnosis is a privilege, and not having one does not invalidate the needs of your personnel. So I'm going to draw a final conclusion here, and it would be to practice compassion for your personnel because you don't know what barriers they face through their lives. If it's in your power to help them succeed, please do so. Jay's posted in the chat as well that the disclosure of diagnosis can be dangerous for some people, and that's absolutely true. Ultimately, you just don't know what the background is of the person who's coming to you with this request. So finally, I'm going to close today by I'm going to give some time for Q&A. I'd like to thank our panelists for being with us today, to Jay and Sherry, because it has been extremely valuable input and expertise. I also want to thank our co-op student, Maggie, who has been supporting this event and all of our other EDI events, and my colleagues at ORIS for continuing to push forward to a more equitable and inclusive working environment. Finally, I want to thank everybody who took the time out of their day today to attend this webinar. I do believe that the first step to a better world is more knowledge, and I'm grateful that you've joined me today, that you've listened to my experience about what it's like to live with a disability and learn a little about how you can make your work more accessible. So at this point, I welcome you to throw any questions you have into the chat, or you can use the raise hand function and verbalize your question if you'd like. All right, Jeff, why don't you start us off if you want to unmute your mic?
Thank you. Great presentation. My question just basically is related to kind of, I guess, what I feel like is maybe a little bit of a disconnect between, you know, seeing this kind of seminar and the reality of what I see on the ground in the university. And first, let me make it very clear that I do not have any kind of disability to my knowledge. So I'm not sort of, you know, worried about myself at all, but I'm thinking about my graduate students. So coming back to this point about like, you know, as an instructor in undergraduate courses or graduate courses for that matter, I know, you know, if I get an accommodation request form from a student, I know how to deal with that. And as Sherry said, it's obvious, you know, it's pretty obvious how to deal with things when it's an employee matter. But what about as a research supervisor? Is there like a formal mechanism? Because like, okay, great, maybe I'm comfortable talking with my students, they're comfortable talking with me, and we identify that there's some accommodation needed, but the accommodation costs money. Where does that come from?
I'm going to ask Sherry to field that question for you, Jeff.
Yeah, hi, Jeff. Well, it depends on, so you're talking about like if they're a research assistant and they need an accommodation and it costs?
No, I'm talking about if they're a graduate student, they may not be employed by the university in any capacity. They're just a student that I am supervising their research.
Okay, well, that's a good question for SAS. And students who have been formally identified with a disability, there are some grants and bursaries that can be applied for to help cover the costs of certain things. So depending on the situation, they may have access to funding if they work through SAS. That doesn't sound like it answered your question. Has that not worked?
It's not really something that's come up yet for me, but I'm basically wanting to know what to do, right, in these situations, and I guess I just feel like that I don't know, that doesn't, so basically you're saying the onus is on the student to go to SAS. And
yeah, that's right. And so they're the ones that can help. They know where the bursaries are and how to apply for.
But I don't think they do. I mean, often these are international students that have just come to Canada. They have no idea about anything, right? So I guess I feel like there's a disconnect between this and what Kate has been talking about today. And you know, in terms of, you know, we're not supposed to be putting the burden on the person with the disability to make their own accommodations, but it seems like the system we have requires that, and it's
yeah.
So I'm a little you know, confused by that.
Yeah, and I agree with what you're saying there, Jeff. I don't love the idea that the burden falls to the student because, to be honest, a lot of these students have been through from kindergarten to grade 12, and then they come to university. They've just transitioned from the children's systems to the adult systems, and so they're jumping through all sorts of hoops to get through that 18-year-old gateway. And then suddenly, you know, we often call it the transition to nothingness in the disability community. As a parent who has two young adults, one has been through it, the other one's going through it right now. So I don't love that it falls on the student, but currently that's the way it operates. But if you do know that a student might have some accommodation needs, it is to direct them to contact Student Accessibility Services, and they are the ones that would have, you know, be aware of the resources and those kind of things. And if a student is stuck, they can always contact me, and you know, we're a service for the students, so we can help anywhere along the line with the accommodation process.
Okay. I would add something there too, if I can. So a couple of things, Jeff, and to just sort of like zoom out, well, not just Jeff, but everybody. So two really important things that have been revealed in recent studies around student behaviors and attitudes. Okay, so we have a group of students right now who experience disability at slightly higher rates than in the past, especially around mental health, right? Invisible disabilities. Though we have a group who are going to experience this more. So we have to change, right? We have to plan for disability. And there is a bit of an attitude in higher education. I've talked about it. It's like a whack-a-mole approach to disability, where you don't do anything at all, right? And then if a problem pops up, you whack it with an accommodation, you hope it goes away, right? But all of the data shows us that we have to make a much larger kind of systemic change in the culture. So we know there are more students who are going to experience disability than before. But the other thing about this group of students that we have right now is that they seek help less than students in the past. That's a really bad combination, right? So to me, it tells me I have to be proactive. That before I even meet my students, they know about their rights around accommodation, right? That I'm organizing with Cherie's office for them to come and give a presentation, right? To all of the students that I might work with. That I talk to students about the accommodations that I need, or the accommodations that have happened in my lab in the past, right? The other thing students talk about accommodations as, and these, I'm using all board game analogies, but as being like the game Battleship, where you throw a diagnosis over the thing and you hope it lands on something on the other side that will actually help you, but you don't know what the things are that could actually help you. And the repertoire of accommodations is unknown. So what can you do, Jeff, to say to students, here's a wide range of different ways that we can accommodate student, needs in my lab or in my research, agenda, right? And be upfront with that in a way to plan for the fact that there are going to be many students in the future who need accommodations, rather than kind of waiting. I'm not saying you're doing that. I'm just saying that that's the best way, I think, to answer a question like this, is to be proactive and in a way assume that every student might need an accommodation. And if we think that way, right, then we engage with the office not on a case-by-case basis, but we engage with the office because it's part of the culture of what we do.
That's actually a really good answer. I like that. I guess it just seems like in terms of efficiency, that would be better if the office, the SAS office or whatever relevant office, didn't need to be individually contacted every time by every supervisor. Like it'd be like, okay, here's a document that sort of lists, like, because they're basically going to be getting asked the same question by 500 professors, right? So, because like I don't know what the student accessibility services office does for students, because anytime you say everything is, well, it's confidential with the student. Okay, well, I can't, if I don't know what you're actually doing for the students. So I feel like there is maybe some transparency needed, but I like the approach of what you're saying, Jay, that if you do it from sort of the ground up, like where you're not going after, you're not sort of targeting someone's specific need, that helps. But it does still require maybe a little bit of easier access to information for faculty to ease that then.
Yeah, and if any department wants, I'd be happy to do a joint presentation with Student Accessibility Services anytime. If people want to know a little bit more about how the processes work, and just to know, let's pull the curtain back. Let's find out, if a student comes forward, for example, to Student Accessibility Services, what do they do next? Let's dispel some of the mystery. And I know, working with a lot of the advisors there, they would love to tell you.
Thank you, Jeff. I think that was a really an important question, and one that maybe we can discuss further from an administrative end. I think that generally the equipping yourself with knowledge ahead of time just about what the accommodation process is like a little bit is a great first step. Gigi and Veronica has posted a comment in the chat that I want to see if I can draw out a little bit, that a diagnosis can be wielded in many ways and it might help some and harm others. I think this is a really interesting and important point. And Gigi, and I'm wondering if I can ask you to, if you are open to it, if you want to unmute and just discuss that point a little bit, if you're still here.
Hi, thanks, Kate, for the invitation. I'm happy to elaborate just a little bit. I mean, I think that medical diagnoses can greatly benefit some folks with disabilities, and that other sometimes people, for example, people with invisible disabilities, and I'm thinking in particular about folks who are part of the consumer survivor ex-patient social movement. Those folks who have done a lot of advocacy work pointing out how psychiatric diagnoses in particular that are, gendered and racist and ageist and so on and so forth, can be wielded on people in ways that actually can produce harm for individuals. So while sometimes folks need diagnoses in order to get the things that they want, like accommodations in universities, for instance, there are plenty of times when psych diagnoses can actually be used against people to invalidate them. I've been thinking a lot about Britney Spears lately. I'm sure a lot of you have been. So, have your millions of dollars taken away from you, all that sort of thing. So I think it's a nuanced stance. I know, and even some people, when they get psych disabilities, when they get diagnoses, sometimes they're helpful. It's really helpful for people to allow, it helps them unpack or understand themselves in new and different and meaningful ways. And then other times it's not so helpful. So just some nuance around understanding diagnoses as privilege, because I think a lot of work in critical disability studies is actually trying to complicate that idea. That's my impromptu contribution. Thank you for asking, Kate, so much.
Thanks, Gigi, and I think that's a really valuable piece of input. Like I said at the beginning, my experience isn't universal, and so I'm always glad to hear how other people have experienced the medical system. I certainly didn't love my journey through it, but I was luckier than most. All right, well, it's almost 5 o'clock. Anybody, we probably have time for a last question or two. If anybody has any last items that they're dying to know about, now's your opportunity. From myself, from Jay, from Sherry. But if there's no other questions, guys, again, really want to thank you for being here today. Knowledge is the first step to a better world, basically. All right, thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.